America, we stand for freedom. Though freedom is never really free, we yearn and strive for government, protecting our liberty.
Good evening and welcome to Your Right to Know by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. My name is Mary Lotze and I will be your co-host for this evening's show. Joining me in co-hosting duty is friend, member of the Fitchburg Republican City Committee, and actually former candidate for mayor of Fitchburg, Attorney Andrew Couture. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Mary.
I'm so happy you're joining us for
pleased to be here.
First night to be a co-host. This is great. And our special guest tonight is actually her second time to be with us, and the first time was 2 years ago when we introduced Republican candidate for the U.S. Congress, 3rd Congressional District, Ann Wofford, to our viewers in the Fitchburg region and to the 3rd Congressional District. Ann, welcome again to Your Right to Know and coming back to join us.
Thank you so much for having me on again. I really appreciate it. I watch the show now on YouTube all the time. I mean, it's great. So
well,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And we have so much ground to cover. And I don't want to really go over a lot of the same things, but I do want to update a lot of the things we talked about before, because a lot has happened in 2 years. Since 2014, when you ran against Niki Tsongas, incumbent for the 3rd Congressional District the first time. So what I'd like you to start out with briefly is tell us about yourself, your background, give us a little idea of why you wanted to do it then, why you wanted to jump in again in 2016.
Well, it's really interesting about the difference between 2014 and 2016 in the run. I actually am Massachusetts. I grew up here, but I was born while my dad was stationed at Fort Meade. So I didn't get here till I was 4, but I got here as soon as I could. And I grew up in a suburb of Springfield. And I went to Cathedral High School in Springfield, and then I went to Cornell University, work study. I also did engineering co-op, majored in chemical engineering, and then I worked in the industry for 17 years. Lived in some different states as part of that career path, but I've been in Haverhill, Massachusetts now for 12 years. That's where we've had our children. This is our first house. We've been in it for 12 years. And I left private industry almost 5 years ago. Just we had 2 young children at the time. My husband still has a crazy work schedule. And for us, it was the right decision. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate that I could go ahead and leave private industry for a few years. But I got to tell you, 2016, I think, is a year like no other in American politics. I'm not so sure that a year ago any of us thought we would be talking about still Bernie Sanders in many ways, with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And really in 2014 I got involved because there was no Republican running, and that people have said, well, that's not a very good reason. I'm like, well, actually it is. I didn't want to vote for it. I'm like, no, so right. I'm going to go do this myself.
It is a good reason.
And 2 years later, we're talking about all the same things. Everything I was talking about in 2014, we're talking about again, but I feel like we're talking about it now on a national level. I got to tell you, I did watch the Republican convention. Mm-hmm. This is being taped end of July. I know it airs in August, yes. But last week, and I think when Donald Trump went, I am your voice, I just felt like, gosh, I wouldn't say things the same way he does sometimes, but he has got across the main issues.
And that's your message also, I am your
yes.
voice. The reason you jumped in the first place in 2014 and now
yes.
again
and now,
is to give the disenfranchised a voice.
More than ever, I feel like here today in 2016, I am the best candidate to represent this district. No more establishment, no more millionaires out of the district. What perspective do you want going down to Washington, D.C.? And we are still talking about jobs in the economy, and we are still talking about illegal immigration and securing our border. And finally, folks are also talking about the regulation and the real impact these federal regulations have, which I talked about 2 years ago. It's not exciting. It's not fun, but there's a cost. You know, in 2014, it was hard to capture how much all these federal regulations were costing, but now it is. We have the numbers for 2015. It cost the economy $1.9 trillion. It's a hidden tax to every family of almost $15,000 a year. It is not a small cost. And so it's great that we're hearing these things, we're talking about them, but it's sad that in 2 years, none of them have been resolved.
Sure.
Now, Ann, as a former candidate, I know that name recognition on election day is crucial to an election win. This is your second run for the same office in the U.S. representative. Do you believe that you have a better name recognition as well as your message getting out at this point that will result in a win in November?
Definitely better name recognition. You know, this is oh, I voted for you last time, I want to help you this time. I was actually having a conversation with someone, we talked about, I'm like, no, on the ballot it's Ann Wofford this time. And
Your name was a little cumbersome the last
time. That was a
time.
rookie mistake. You know, that was, I'd always been as Rose Ann L. Earhart Wofford. I got the signatures, and when I certified at the Secretary of State's office in Boston, they're like, you're good, and I'm like, and I'd like to be Ann Wofford on the ballot. And they're like, yeah, no, that's not how it works. So I knew how it worked this time, and it's just simple, Ann Wofford, and I think that helps. I think that actually did confuse some folks last time. Big difference in 2014 is, as a candidate, spent about a little over $30,000, and my opponent, Niki Tsongas, spent almost $1 million. I ended up with 37% of the vote, essentially 37 cents per vote, whereas she spent over $6.80 a vote. So, you know, there was a definite cost imbalance. It was kind of a David and Goliath. We're very much going to see that again. There's that power of the incumbency where you continue to build these war chests. Again, I don't have a primary opponent, and I will tell you, I spoke with several folks last fall when I was like, you know, nothing's getting better. I know you said before you were interested in running, you know, and I found a lot of people just didn't want to go up against the Tsongas name, and I looked at them. Okay, it's a name. I'm like, you got to win on your ideas and your message, and yes, you need your money. You do need money to get the message out, and that was the hardest thing I learned last time. I had that naive, it's an idea. You get your idea, you get your message out, it'll go, but you know what? If you don't have the money to get that message to people, you're an unknown, it's harder to get out. Already had an easier time at getting out the message. You just established that network in the 37 cities and towns in the district. And so that's definitely a big difference. There was no ground game last time. There is a ground game this time. It's a message that is resonating, and it's a message where people actually do remember. I talked about that there's something, oh, I did hear you mention that, and it's all anybody's talking about now. So this is a wonderful, that part about it is good. That's helped the national message.
Now, what are the issues that you find to be most critical to your constituencies as you travel around to meet and speak to people?
It always comes down to jobs and the economy. It always does. And there are different things that impact. And of course, we're here in Fitchburg, and in the district, this has the second highest unemployment rate. It's only behind Lawrence. And you have to sit here and go, 2 years ago, people weren't happy. We're still not happy. We're being told great unemployment numbers. Somebody told me it's the same as like 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, nobody was talking about wage stagnation, no upward mobility. You weren't staying in a job you hated because you were afraid you couldn't get another one. More people with part-time employment. You've had an entire lost decade of folks that would have gone out as entrepreneurs, you know, in that time period that haven't, because if they fail, there's nowhere to go back to. Dodd-Frank impacts everybody. It's a disaster that actually has hurt that American entrepreneurial spirit. And, you know, listening to Bernie on Monday night, I got to tell you, he's the one who goes, repeal Dodd-Frank. Said that 2 years ago. Say it again. And I say replace it with Glass-Steagall. It worked for all that time. Why reinvent the wheel? The Bernie idea was a 21st century Glass-Steagall, but I'm engineer, tried and true. We had a solution. It worked. Bill Clinton got rid of it. Just a disaster, and we need to go back to that. But that's another thing that has also hurt us. And I think this is something that people are realizing, you know what, you can keep telling us it's great, but you just have to look at ourselves or our neighbors, and we know it's not. So how do we bring the jobs back? How do we make our economy go again? And it goes back to the regulation and illegal immigration. These go hand in hand in terms of impacting our economy and our job opportunity and our job growth. So, you know, that's what it does always come down to, is jobs in the economy.
Now, recently, there's been a huge controversy in Massachusetts about the Attorney General unilaterally reinterpreting the firearms bill. Have your constituents approached you on this?
I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, always have been, ever since that bumper sticker as a kid, you know, politicians love unarmed peasants. I was about 7, and I read it, and I asked my dad, who was driving, I said, what's a peasant? So, you know, that's when my dad went into the founding of Western civilization. And so I guess maybe I just have always tied it to, you know, yes. And I do have a Class A license here in the state to carry. I will defend my house, my children. You know, I actually got it because my husband, he doesn't work that many nights now, but he did a few years ago. And you know, there were some hard winter storms where the police couldn't get to you, and those homes were targeted.
Sure.
You know, that was done on purpose, and I was not going to be a victim, and I never will be. So, you know, that is a very important right to me. You just kind of take a look at the number of hunting licenses issued every year, and you're like, we're going to be okay. You know, I mean, seriously, as a nation. So I do believe in that standing militia.
Excellent.
And let me ask you, because Niki Tsongas, your incumbent, has been in position. She wasn't always our representative here. There was some redistricting 4-6 years ago. But we really, in my estimation, and I'm sure Andrew will agree with this, we haven't seen any changes in this area. Please tell me, has there been any improvement in our area, our region, in the last 4 years under Niki Tsongas's support?
No. Fitchburg's consistently the second highest unemployment. Gardner's right behind it at 3rd in the district. Lawrence, of course, being 1st. And of course, Lawrence is now a sanctuary city.
Sure.
2 years ago it was not. Now it is. And I have said from the beginning, no federal funding for sanctuary cities. I will continue to say that. You have to obey the laws. I mean, I think we've had a lot of law and order going on here in this country, and we are a nation of laws, and we do expect folks to follow them. And just because the city council decides they don't like that law, it doesn't mean they don't follow it. You then work to change laws. You don't just say, we're not going to follow it.
Well, it just seems that in Massachusetts we have an entirely Democratic representation, and they're in lockstep with the White House and the administration. We have, so I feel that as a Republican, I feel as a conservative, I feel actually as a Christian, we have no voice.
We don't.
On Capitol Hill.
We don't. We do not.
And that's because we have no diversity of thought, of mind, of individuals representing us.
And you have to figure, she's voted and supported Obamacare. I have been opposed to it from the beginning. There is no way in the world she could have read that bill and supported it. I admit I only made it about 850 pages in when I knew this was a disaster.
And then you fell asleep?
No.
You got through that?
That's the TPP. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is that is the cure to insomnia. But no, you need a spreadsheet to read the Affordable Care Act because it references this and references that and go. I mean, you have to. I had to take literally notes to be able to follow this bill. It is not good for the economy. Us alone, it has not helped. On the business side, I have seen the tax forms, and I know it's a health care bill, but it is a tax bill, as the Supreme Court told us. The IRS forms that businesses have to fill out for their health care, that needs to go away. And one of the things I liked about Donald Trump is he even said he will repeal and replace, and I said that 2 years ago. I say it even more now. I even just had one, you know, it's a non-generic, go from $50 a month to $65 a month. And again, it's that way because I don't take the one the government says is approved and you can get it for free. You know, you don't do what they say, it always costs you. We kept our pediatrician, but it's not one we could keep. It cost us more. We were talking about my daughter with the 5 stitches in her foot. So you go to the pediatrician, not a doctor we could keep, that cost us more. Then we actually had to go to the ER because the pediatrician's office said it was beyond what they could do. And, you know, it was $250 out of pocket. I mean, if she had to do it, if she did it in December, that would have saved us $100. I mean, and then, but this adds up. These small things, they add up and they impact your average, typical family. They're not going down. I said before 2 years ago, sell it across state lines, say it again. I am even more an advocate now of health savings accounts than I was 2 years ago, but I think it's because I've been able to work out, in at least my own mind and on paper, the details. How do you do this so it works and it's non-taxable and you can pass it on to the next generation's health savings account if you don't need it all while you're here. So that is a big deal, and I want to be part of those solutions going forward because I do believe Donald Trump will win. He will go ahead and sign to repeal that law, and we get to get the great ideas going forward.
Donald Trump actually, I believe, is the one who used the term, by electing Hillary Clinton, we've got the status quo candidate. And that actually seems to be what you've been saying, is that everything in Massachusetts with its strict Democratic delegation that we're representing, and also we know if Mrs. Clinton gets elected, it will be the third President Obama term, that this will really be a status quo. So what you're experiencing and what you're talking about and telling people you want to change.
Yeah, and if you keep electing the same people, you will keep getting the same results. I mean, remember, she supports the Iran deal. I have read it, and I am opposed to it. And of course, you know, my children, my oldest will be 18 when that 10-year period is up. What is going to be happening at that time? They've already violated it. The deal never made sense to begin with. Once we imposed sanctions, if you read it, they automatically could back out. So there was never anything we could do if we didn't like what they did. It was a disaster. Of course, she doesn't think the Syrian refugees need increased vetting. I had said from the beginning that is a regional issue. Now, I do have a brother-in-law who legally immigrated here from Iraq, and another one who legally immigrated here from Sri Lanka. But the brother-in-law from Iraq, during those wars, his family sought refuge in both Syria and Jordan. This is a regional issue. We need to solve it there. And we shouldn't even be bringing them in, especially when we know the vetting is not adequate. And of course, we recently had that incident in Lowell. And before then, nobody could tell us who was here. It was amazing how quickly we got some numbers on how many folks were actually in Lowell. And that is actually one of the things I want to do, though, is I want to actually get local control to that if we're bringing in any type of refugee, you have to go and get approval from your city council.
Well, they really are coming in. We allow people in the dark of night.
It
sounds
really
cliche,
is, and you can go to military bases
without
without notifying the governor. So, of course, you know, that's a way around it. But I want to bring that back to local control, because keep in mind that the average immigrant household is going to consume 33% more cash welfare, 57% more food assistance, and 44% more Medicaid dollars than the average native, your average citizen household. So there is a direct cost there to it. You also have to keep in mind our economy. We keep hearing, you know, not necessarily refugees, but the illegal immigrants, they only take the jobs nobody else wants. Well, basic economics, if you need a job filled and nobody's taking it, what do you do with your salary? You raise it. Then you're going to start to have people take those jobs. Also, it keeps down wages, because you have a constant supply coming in, so you're not letting the wages go as you've got your experience. Again, that's where the securing our nation's border and enforcing our immigration laws comes into play. And again, said all that 2 years ago, saying it again now, and a lot of people are saying it now. And I will support that. We don't have anyone in our delegation between our 2 Democrat senators and all 9 Democrat Congress folks saying that.
I know we go back to when we talk about sanctuary cities and we talk about illegal immigration. One of the things that I always tend to find out is the Democrats paint the picture that if you're against illegal immigration, you are bigoted, you're biased, you're a xenophobe. I mean, they start throwing all of these pejoratives at you.
They do.
And yet what you're talking about is the pure economic sense of all of our taxpayers out there. Everyone watching this show is a taxpayer. And what you're doing is you're talking about money coming out of my pocket. Not that we don't have the Christian value that we want to help people, but at what cost, at what expense to
Well,
our
and,
safety?
you know, when my brother-in-laws came over, you know, one came over through a company, again, had a job, everything lined out when he got here. Now, granted, my other brother-in-law did come under refugee status, but he was working right away when he got here. You take my own grandmother, legally immigrated from County Mayo, Ireland. She just came over. There was nothing given to her when she got here. And really what you have is the Democrats that have created a culture of dependency. And your Republicans are really the ones who want independence, that American spirit, that American entrepreneurism, and I want to help foster that again, because we're not. We keep saying the government needs to do this and the government needs to do that. I'm about a lot less government. I want them out of my health care, I want them out of my children's education, and I really want the regulations to back off.
I'll let Andrew jump in with a question, but I do want to ask you something, because Andrew and I were both with you on our Fitchburg block party on July 2nd, and it was a wonderful event for us. We enjoyed ourselves tremendously. We enjoyed having you at our booth. You met a lot of people that afternoon and right through the early evening. Talk to us about that and tell us what your experience and what your perception was on what people said to you.
Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I got a lot of questions about the opioid epidemic and where I stood on that. And, you know, I am all about giving local law enforcement the tools it needs, whatever they need, because Haverhill's going to fight it different than Fitchburg's going to fight it different than Lowell. What they need to address it. I don't want any national anything, honestly. I want to let our local folks tell us what they need. But again, securing our border will help stop the flow of some of these illegal drugs, the opioids coming into our country. So there's another thing that will help with the securing of the border. A lot of talk about the economy. A lot of people had interesting stories about the jobs they have, not the jobs they want, or the jobs they expected to have at this point in their lives.
Or the jobs they may have had 8 years ago.
Exactly, exactly. So it really just fascinating stories, and just working on solutions with folks. You know, give them, this is kind of how I think, what they think of that. And that's really, even when I was getting the signatures across the district, what was going on. I learned there's some common themes, whether I was getting signatures in Marlborough or getting signatures in Methuen. I mean, that really were resonating, and they're not being addressed. Our Veterans Affairs is still a disaster. How many years has that been going on? And that's because it just has to survive the latest news cycle, survive the latest administration. We actually need to be doing something. Our military doesn't have a very high morale right now. I don't think it has enough people right now. I don't think it has the maintenance going on that it needs. Our military has not been taken care of by our representatives at all. It needs to be a fighting force, not a social experiment, and we need to get back to making sure our military has what it needs.
Now, let's face it, this is a different year, different election cycle with a unique and anti-establishment, very charismatic Republican candidate, Donald Trump. He's leading the country forward. So, as you see this as, do you see this as helpful for you and your candidacy?
I see it as helpful, but again, we're talking about a lot of the same issues. So I actually think he helps in this year. And I know everyone says, well, it's a presidential year in Massachusetts, a Republican will never win. You can't beat the Tsongas name. And I'm like, well, the way I figure, we got a lot of new people coming out to vote that, like me, are tired of the same thing. And we're not angry. I hate it when folks say we're angry. Our answer to you is no, thank you. You know, you've tried your stuff for the past 30 years. You have grown federal government enormously. You continue to tell us what we need, and the answer is no, thank you. I don't want a big federal government. You don't know any better than I do what I need, or my family needs, or my neighborhood needs. So we're not angry. The answer is no, thank you. And I think that helps. I think at this point, she's been there 9 years. She hasn't really done anything for this district. You know, GE comes to Boston. They used to be here in Fitchburg. They used to be big. Any attempt to bring them here? No. You know, we have go ahead.
You have
yes.
the sneakers.
New Balance
New
and
Balance.
Lawrence.
Yep.
Was the, what's that, Polytech, was that in the
Polytech
third
was in Lawrence.
congressional district also?
Yes,
And they're
that's
gone
another
now.
one. Yes, that was gone. That was Lowell, right? Not
But-
was
but
it
I-
Lawrence?
I
Was it
just
Lawrence?
don't-
Was that
I
one
just
Lawrence?
don't
There's
see us
another one in
making-
Lowell that did some of the Army type data
well,
things.
I work in Methuen, which is right across the border,
Oh, yeah.
in Lawrence. So I'm very familiar with both, you know,
Sure.
the problems of Lawrence
Yeah.
equal to the problems of Fitchburg. And
Sure, very similar cities.
They are. And Haverhill is
enormously
where I
similar.
live, and I have friends who work at the New Balance facility in Lawrence. That's 850 jobs. And again, 2 years later, we're still talking about the same thing, and it's worse because the military has said, no, we don't want those 225,000 pairs of shoes a year, thank you. So yes, I understand now they're working on must be American made, but now we have Wolverine. 2 years ago, we didn't have them. That's American made. In fact, they just opened a huge thing in Waltham, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Haverhill used to be Shoe City. Why are they not bringing them up here? So we have New Balance and Wolverine right here, you know.
There's a lot to be said for similar economies
Right.
together.
I mean,
Yeah.
but I got to tell you, she doesn't
Efficiencies.
think big. You know, she is wrong on all the big things, just wrong. And that we need that change. We need to be not sitting there and waiting for something to happen, but being proactive, growing our economy here, and standing up for things. And I don't mean a grandstanding gun sit-on that had nothing to do with the issue that was going on there in Orlando, which was a travesty. I'm not even sure it was beyond a travesty what happened there at the Orlando nightclub shooting. You know, that just became a talking point and this sit-in that was disrespectful to the House of Representatives and the positions they held. And it actually kind of missed the point. You know, he did say Allah is great. Where they're still investigating why did it take them 3 hours to get in to those folks. There's a lot about that again, they look for talking points and not solving the problem.
We have to solve a problem. Now our show is coming to an end.
Oh.
I know, it's so quick, just as we get into a lot of good conversations. I would like you to tell our viewers, just face the camera and tell them why Ann Wofford is a eminently more qualified and better candidate to represent us come November.
I also want to thank you guys very much for having me on.
It
So
is
I did
our
want to make
pleasure.
sure I thanked you guys very much. I really enjoyed coming here and talking the issues with you guys. But I really want to say that if you keep electing the same people, you will keep getting the same results. And ask yourself this question, are you really better off now than you were 9 years ago when your current representative was elected? This is essentially paralleling the Obama economy. And if you want things to change, you need to change who you send to Washington, D.C. I will work on bringing jobs and strengthening our economy. I will work to secure our nation's border and enforce our immigration laws. And I will also work to decrease this federal regulation so we have control of our lives and not the federal government. I hope to earn your vote this November. I am asking for your vote this November, and thank you very much for watching.
And do you have a website or contact numbers or anything that
I do.
you would
We
like
have a
people
phone
to
number.
know?
Yeah, we do have a phone number. It's 978-701-1920, and we do call back. If you leave a message, it kind of rotates around with folks. You will always get a call back.
And we will post that on our Facebook page.
And we also have a website. It is woffordforcongress.com, and there's only O's in Wofford. All right, so it's WOFFORD. I do spell out for congress.com. We have a Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for
We
coming.
really appreciate your being here with Andrew and I tonight, and much good luck.
thank you both very much.
And as you watch Your Right to Know, we thank you for watching us tonight and sitting in here with the FRCC. And as we leave you, we want you to remember that your city and local Republican City and Town Committee is the grassroots organization that supports and holds dear your liberty and your constitutional rights and conservative values. We encourage you to join us. Why? Because to us, GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people. And we always stand for freedom. Thank you and good night.
America, we stand all unite to yearn and strive for our republic that reflects our values, that preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights, and goes forth in power and